Hear the story, feel the call. This is the Ministry Spotlight.
How long have you been doing jail ministry in Pontotoc County?
It's a little bit over 11 years.
How then will they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how are they to believe in him of whom they have never heard? And how are they to hear without someone preaching? And how are they to preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the good news.
You know, there's about an 80% return rate in the county jails around for, and so.
Return as far as inmates coming back in?
Yeah. Gotten out,
come back
second, third, sometimes fifth. So many of them tell us, I'm ready, I'm tired of this. But they go back to the environment that they came in from, and it just takes a tremendous amount of preparation to do that. You know, I'm gonna say probably, and I don't have an exact statistic on this, but I'm gonna say 80% or more of the people who are in jail here right now have something to do with drugs, not necessarily addiction, but with the whole process, you know. And once you get involved in that situation, it's a lot harder to get out of than I ever dreamed it was. I mean, you know, some of those guys, it's like former players. They get close to my heart, and they go out, and in 3 months, 4 months, they're back, you know, and serving a sentence. I guess what I'm trying to say in the long run is this, and our system is broken. The people who are doing our system are doing a great job of making the best of it, you know. And until we get something else, we have to do that. But it's a lot easier to get in that system than it is to get out of it once you get started. And it's due just to dates you have to make, restitution you have to make, and those kind of things.
All right, so is there a typical night? I mean, what does a typical night or day, if you're going during the day, what does that typically look like?
It's pretty routine. One of the things that I learned from Pat is that if we are going to continue to get the freedom that we have in the ministry, then we have to be very, very conscious of the rules, not just of the rules, but of the feeling of the jailers and the ones that open the door, you know, and close the door. And so typically we gather together in the lobby and we have prayer, and then we begin to go back. There are five men's zones that we have to go to individually. There's not a gathering place there, so we go to 5 different zones that night. That's one of the things a little hard to get used to, you know. And we've talked about some things to do different. We just hadn't got there yet, you know. So then we go from zone to zone to zone, and we meet with the guys. And I tell the men that go with me a lot of times, the fellowship with them sometimes means more than the word that we're taking on that particular night. Now, the word is the it's the reason we go, but you know what I'm saying in that. So we spend a little time fellowshipping, but we can't let that become what we do. If we don't take the word, then we're not fulfilling our calling, you know. So we go from zone to zone to zone. We pray with the guys. Someone speaks a message, and then we spend a little more time in fellowship, then we move to the next zone. However we try to do it, it's about 2.5 hours to get through 5 zones, you know, and so that takes us there. And then sometimes, not every time, but sometimes there's a go back to that zone because of something on someone's heart, or sometimes we're needed in the holding cells. Sometimes the people in the holding cells are not capable of communicating because of their state. Sometimes they really need to communicate, you know. I was in this morning, and there was a young man who was very upset. He just got back from prison, and he got picked up, and when they checked his, well, he didn't have a license because it was back there. This was last night. So he actually hadn't done anything wrong. He just was concerned about being back in, about what his parole officer would say. So I spent a good deal of time talking with him this morning. I didn't have a lot of answers, but we had a lot of communication, you know. That's kind of what we do typically, and then how that changes from time to time.
Okay, so I personally remember the first day I went into jail for jail ministry. I remember the door shutting behind me. I remember looking at my buddy. I remember the smells. Do you remember the first day? How did you feel that first time you went into the jail?
I was a little bit unnerved, and like you, I remember those exact things that you just talked about. You know, I got there before Pat did, and at that time, he and one more guy were the only ones. This was a Wednesday night, and now Kevin was going on Sunday before I started. You know, so this was a Wednesday, and Pat and the one other guy weren't there, and I'm sitting in the lobby. I'm a few people in and out at that time of day, but I'm wondering if they think I'm here to be locked up or anyhow, it was just an uneasy feeling and not knowing what to do. And so then it's one of those things that nobody set me down and said, all right, we need to do this, or we don't need to do this. So I remember as we go in, it was a tremendous learning curve. I remember the sound of that heavy metal door closing behind me, and hoping that the person that opened it doesn't go home before we get back, you know, to get out. After 11 years, I'm better than I was at seeing when a guy is sincere in making the change and changing the lifestyle for him, for his family, and for everybody involved. So when that's happened, and it has a few times, and I'm sure it's happened a lot of times that we don't know about, you know, but when you kind of see that click, and you know, Jesus said, I'm the light of the world, and you begin to see behind that darkness in their eyes, you begin to see light, you know, then one of these guys will be making his first speech, his first sermon to the inmates this Sunday. But he's one that very evident in his life. And he's not the only one, but he's the most current one, you know. That is a big heart lift for us that go there, and you know, it takes time to make that change.
Coach, what has been the biggest challenge in this ministry?
I think probably for me personally, and then I think when we have new people come into the ministry, understanding the nature of the ministry that we do. You know, it's different in going into school or any other thing that I've done. because we see these men in a completely different light than the public sees them. And we see them separate from their crime, separate from their habit, separate from those that they've hurt. They are so very, very kind and gracious and understanding when we come in. And I mean, we go in there tonight, and unless there's a brand new guy that hadn't heard of us before, every man in that cell will hug me with a sincere handshake and a hug. That means a lot to me. The challenge is to realize that for every inmate in there, there's somebody outside who is hurt, who is bothered. So it's a hard thing to explain, but for me to go out and proclaim how much I love them in a public way, sometimes it's not received the way I mean for it to be received. So that for us to understand, and then for the new people that come along with us, you know, we have to understand that we're going into a special situation, and we're called to love the inmate and to share in love, but to also be honest and also be timely with what we're saying to them and what we're saying to others concerning them, you know.
If you remember, I know 11 years is a long time ago, but how did you first get involved with jail ministry?
I remember exactly. I think you knew Pat Ewing before he passed, and you know Pat's a very strong individual. I convinced Pat to coach upward basketball here, and he did, and did a great job. He's so competitive that the upward nature was hard for him to adapt to, but he did, and he did a great job teaching kids, relating to kids, both basketball and scripture, you know. So after he did that, and then when I retired from here, I ran into Pat. He said, all right, I coached upward basketball for you. Now you come to jail ministry for me, you know. So I did, started that in the summer after I retired. And I knew the first night that I went, it was a calling for me. It was something that, as a matter of fact, I've learned since then, Brother Casey, that, and I'm not trying to elevate myself at all, I just believe that everything that I've done in my life has prepared me for this ministry, you know, and so it's just a call. So shortly after we go, and getting to know the guys, many of them I've coached a brother, or I coached an uncle. There's a feeling there. And when I see them and the way they welcome us when we come, that started happening very early. I realized that maybe for the first time in my life, I am intentionally and personally doing something for somebody that can't do anything back for me. And I realized through thinking about that that's what the ministry is that he's calling me to.